Born in an ancient, sorcerous catastrophe, Zyra is the wrath of nature given form, an alluring hybrid of plant and human, kindling new life with every step. She views the many mortals of Runeterra as little more than prey for her seeded progeny, and thinks nothing of slaying them with flurries of deadly spines. Though her true purpose has not been revealed, Zyra wanders the world, indulging her most primal urges to colonize and strangle all other life from it. Background. Early life. Zyra existed thousands of years ago as a collective hive mind of carnivorous plants that lived together in a place called Gardens of Zyra, somewhere in the Shurima jungle. Sometime during the Rune Wars, a party of soldiers accompanied by an ambitious sorceress visited the garden and were attacked by the plants. In an act of fear, the sorceress unleashed a magical attack that ignited the fumes of the swamp, causing a magical explosion that destroyed everything in its path. The gardens remained lifeless for hundreds of years after. Contemporary history. After centuries without life in the gardens, Zyra emerged from the lifeless ground, not fully plant nor fully human. She struggled to understand her new existence and came to be curious of the new world she was able to explore. Her plants seemed to be slowly expanding westward towards the mother-of-life river system of the Shurima capital. With the flowers. Zyra's flowers were collected by a flower shop in the market city of Kumangra. The owner watered one of the flowers and placed it in his study. From the flower bloomed a large mass of vines and flowers that covered the entire study and wrapped the shop owner into a cocoon, killing him. After the shop owner's wife found him, Zyra appeared in the study, stopping the wife from destroying the flower and wrapping her in a cocoon, killing her. As the woman died, she saw visions of a world covered in Zyra's plants with nothing else in sight. Appearance. Zyra is a wondrous vision of a creature, resembling a human woman covered with plants, which seem to be parts of her body. Her eyes are very similar to a panther's, with narrow irises that are common to predators. Personality. Zyra is a vicious, predatory creature. In spite of gaining human intelligence, Zyra still has the natural instinct of consuming and devouring of a vicious predator. Her ultimate goal is to envelop the world with her plants, making it beautiful and ridding it of all that isn't her. Abilities. Unique physiology. Zyra is a hybrid of human and plant, something the world has never seen before. She was created on a magical accident during the Rune Wars, a disastrous explosion that mixed the natural elemental magics of Ixtal's swamps and the careless spells of an unnamed sorceress. Magic plants. Zyra can create plant life as she sees fit, and is able to create vines, thorn-spitter flowers, and other types of plants. Infection. The spores in Zyra's plants can infect humans and grow into full-blooming plants, killing them from the inside. Pseudo-teleportation. Zyra is able to reform wherever her flowers have taken root. Relations. Humans. She thinks of humans as no little more than prey and thinks they show no respect to the environments they live. Spirits. She has expressed animosity towards spirits and thinks they are arrogant. Biography. Rise of the Thorns. Zyra's memory is long and runs as deep as the roots of the earth. Her kind was young when the Rune Wars raged, when mortal armies fought one another for the very keys of creation. Hidden in the jungles south of Kumangu, somewhere between the great rivers that divide eastern Shurima, lay the fabled Gardens of Zyra. Elemental magics had turned the soil there in strange and unpredictable ways, giving rise to fierce, carnivorous plants that preyed upon any creature that strayed within reach. They infested and they devoured, caring nothing for the squabbles of mortals, content merely to coil their vines through the forests and swamplands. In their own way, they were all Zyra. And nourishment was plentiful, even in the midst of war. A small company of soldiers, their allegiance long since lost to time, advanced through those lands in search of some now-forgotten prize. They were led by an ambitious sorceress, but they were far from home, bound to succumb to the noxious fumes and spores of that accursed place. The denizens of the garden set upon them, spined tendrils lashing through armor and flesh with sadistic ease. Though they fought valiantly, the warriors knew they could not hold out long, and turned to their sorceress to save them. Gathering her powers, she wrought a mighty blast. The air burned with runic symbols, casting their eerie light even as the thorny overgrowth closed in. In that very instant, a rogue spark ignited the gases of the swamp, and the resulting magical explosion obliterated every living thing for miles around. Of the scattered survivors of the Rune Wars, none would ever know what fate had befallen the gardens of Zyra. Centuries passed. The land where the battle had been fought lay empty and lifeless above ground. But in the depths, something stirred. Long had the energies that were unleashed there settled and curdled, nourished by the fallout. A seed pod bulged, pulsing with unnatural life, until a creature clawed its way free, gasping and confused. It beheld a broken and changed world, brimming with new vitality and new ideas. Its mind was a puzzle of conflicting memories, drawn from the loamy earth and forced into its fledgling consciousness. It could recall the warmth of the sun, the taste of rain, words of power, and the agony of 100 mortal deaths. She called herself Zyra, without quite understanding why. As she ventured out into the wildlands beyond her birthplace, Zyra knew she was different from other creatures she encountered. Mortals were fearful and unpleasant things, while more ethereal entities tended to be capricious or arrogant. None of them seemed to respect the realms they inhabited, despoiling everything with their mere presence, and that filled Zyra with rage and contempt. Almost unbidden, new life sprang up in her footsteps, voracious plant forms that changed and evolved beneath her gaze, hurling poisonous barbs or sprouting fresh tendrils at an alarming rate. Unrooted and free to wander, Zyra and her deadly progeny feed and grow, strangling all other life from the world. She has blighted farmland, overrun entire settlements, and crushed those warriors brave or foolish enough to confront her, always leaving a menagerie of botanical horrors in her wake. As the rivers of Shurima begin to run anew, strange flora has been sighted on their banks, spreading slowly westward with each passing season. Whether pulled from the earth or purged by fire, the growth does not seem to be slowing. Short story. With the Flowers. Lore 1. The humidity of Tonica Market and the crowd's fragrant odor usually rushed buyers into hasty decisions, but Hadley stood transfixed. Her eyes had fallen upon the strange, tangled bud encased with red withered leaves, a specimen she had never seen before. "You don't want that," the old florist said. "It's a rare night-blooming zycad, plucked from the southern jungles, where sunlight never touches the forest floor. It's more for potion brewers or alchemists." The merchant directed her gaze to a bouquet of sapphire roses. "Now, these are from fair Ionia. Adapted them to our robust Kumangra soil myself. Or perhaps some pearls of the moon." Hadley was not swayed. Sapphire roses and pearls of the moon flashed their colors for any eyes to see. This zycad held exotic potential like the kraken lilies along the Serpentine Delta, or Perthen corpse tulips. Rare flowerings were precisely her and Caswortha's type of indulgence. "I'll take the zycad." The florist welcomed the gold pressed into his palm, despite the doubt scrawled across his face. He deftly cradled the bud in a nest of damp silk, and planted the parcel into Hadley's waiting hands. She noticed the aerial rootlets clinging to a shard of something hard and chalk white. "What's this?" "Zycads cling to foreign objects," the merchant said. "That one's grafted to a bit of bone." Lore 2. Casworth was bent over his antique desk, scribbling notes in the margins of his ledger by candlelight. He didn't look up until Hadley set the ceramic upon his table. The strange Zycad, half buried in a mound of wetted soil, already seemed happy. Its reds and greens vibrant and slick with life. A budding gift for a blooming businessman. She planted a kiss on Casworth's cheek, feeling clever. He smiled and turned to examine the specimen. "When you said you needed flowers to brighten the place up, I assumed they'd be colorful." Casworth jabbed the plant with his quill. "What is this curious fellow?" "A most extravagant gift to celebrate the opening of the Upper Kumangra's newest trading supplier. Casworth's exotic goods." Casworth pulled his wife onto his lap. "Well, if you say this is a rarity indeed, then we are in for a treat." He kissed her sweetly. A single petal opened up, unfolding into the darkening room. "It's beginning," Hadley said. "Will you be up all night?" "Most likely. There are still several invoices that need rubber stamping. The partners still have concerns about the shipping lanes." Hadley yawned. "Don't let me bore you, dear wife. Run along to bed. I'll wake you when it starts to flower." "Thank you, sweet husband." Lore 3. Hadley awoke to a creeping sensation on her ankle. Infernal skitterants were everywhere, this near to the jungle. She kicked it away. Sleepily blinking, she turned to the empty pillow next to her. Casworth hadn't come to bed. The nagging insect was undaunted, and was crawling further up her shin. She flung off the bedsheets and saw that there was no insect, but rather a tendril vine weaving through her toes, entangling her ankle, and twining around her leg. Panic shoved sleep from her mind. She kicked, but could not get the green and red shoots to release her leg. They tightened, biting into her flesh. She pried them off with her fingernails. Her hands bled from thorny splinters. The snaking stalks wound a trail from under the bedchamber door, where they sprouted aerial rootlets to climb the bed frame. Her mind immediately flashed to Casworth. Armed with a flickering lantern and a pair of sewing shears, Hadley followed the vines through the hallway of their manse. Their circumference widened the closer she stepped toward its source, which she now saw was in Casworth's study. The door took several tries to open. Hadley hadn't known what to expect, but it wasn't this. The room was covered, floor to ceiling, with floral growth. A riot of obscene colors danced in her lantern's flicker. Exotic bulbs dangled from the walls, their finger-like leaves undulating as if drawing breath. Flowers seemed to mock her through the darkness, flashing their rainbow petals like signal fires. All had sprouted from a singular dark nexus, an enormous closed flower bud, which lay on the fainting couch by the fireplace, where Hadley herself often read while Casworth worked. Bits of ceramic and soil lay strewn about. The Zycad had outgrown its habitat. All manner of protrusion crept from its pulsating petals. Everything in Hadley's mind screamed for her to flee her home, put it to the torch, and burn that hideous bouquet. But not without Casworth. Vines twisted around the legs of the chair, the legs of the study table, the legs of her husband. Still sitting in his chair, Casworth was cocooned from head to toe by a writhing mass of leaves. Hadley reached his side, bare feet slipping on the foliage underfoot. She cut frantically at the strangling vines, but each snip of the shears only made them tighten their grip and produce little thorns that pierced her and her husband. Blood trickled out. Where the drops landed, Zyra blossoms burst forward to feed. Hadley freed one of Casworth's hands. It was pale and cold to the touch. A stench filled the air, like a rotting corpse. With tears in her eyes, she turned her head toward the fainting couch, where the Zyra bud was flowering. The stench grew worse. Hadley retched. The gargantuan petals peeled backward in colorful layers, revealing oblong petals of striking scarlet and deep green, garlanded in black tips, revealing a woman in place of the stamen. Her hair was red as blood. Her flesh like leaves. Vines and petals wreathed her in deadly beauty. Her eyes opened. They reminded Hadley of a panther's narrow irises seeing only prey. The woman who blossomed from the flower arose. Hadley clutched the shears like a dagger. "You wish to prune me already," the thing said, its deep voice ensnaring Hadley. "What are you?" "The bloom you long to witness." The stench turned. Gone was the reek of death. Hadley inhaled sweet fragrances, orange blossoms, the aroma of sapphire roses, the fruity scent of kraken lilies, the musk of pearls of the moon, the delicate hints of wisteria. There were more, secret flowers, but she somehow knew their names. They smelled of colors her eyes never saw. A name formed in Hadley's mind. Zyra. "Thank you for the lovely garden," Zyra said, nodding toward Casworth's remains. "You tended me well, but we need more sustenance. To make the soil here more fertile." Hadley saw visions of a world covered by a bouquet of colorful death. It was a beautiful riot of hues, soft and fluttering, choking cities. There were no graves, no war, no money. Hadley was breathless. She didn't even feel the vines pull her down, nor the thorns bury themselves in her flesh, rending her skin, spilling her blood. "Step into the garden that ever grows," Zyra whispered through the stems and petals. "Death blossoms, and you don't want to miss the colors, do you?" Hadley did not respond, for she was with the flowers.